But this story comes from that country. The people of Ireland, they have received all of their inner riches from Mother Nature. In olden times, the monks of the abbeys would make art from natural matters. They took inspiration from sights they saw every day. A rabbit leaving its burrow, a fox running across the hillside with its red brush of a tail streaming behind it, or a horse standing in a field with its back against the rain, or a hawk making its point far up in the sky. Even their painting materials came from the non-human world, birds' feathers and colors gathered from the earth. And so all of their expression, all of their means of saying what was in their souls, came first from the universe they saw every day all around them, under the open air. The Irish were not alone in this. For instance, the first music was made by blowing air through reed pipes, or keeping rhythm by tapping one stick upon another. But the Irish, they made music from one very unusual source. It is their finest musical instrument. It is contrary to play, and it has its roots in the sea. And so this story you're about to hear is a story of how the Irish invented the harp. Once upon a time, before swans learned to swim, and before bears had fur coats, the wife of Breffni O'Rourke liked to walk the sands at Ross's Point. She enjoyed looking out across the Atlantic, hoping to see whatever glories might lie far away to the west. As she walked, she listened to the croaks of the gulls, to the hiss of the tide, or to the ocean's hush. One morning, however, she heard a new sound. It was both strange and wondrous. It was melody so tinkling and beautiful that she thought she must capture it forever. She looked around to see where the sound came from, but she could not find the source of these harmonies. No one walked near her. The sands just stretched white and empty. It was all very peculiar. The noise grew louder and then fainter, and then it grew louder and then fainter. She asked herself, what comes and goes, and then comes again and goes again? And as she thought for a minute, she found the answer rising in her brain. The wind. The wind comes again. It comes and goes, and then comes again and goes again. And so the Lady Breffni, she looked in the direction from which the wind blew, and there at last she found the source of the glittering tunes. On the sands at Ross's Point, near the original Coney Island, there lay the beached carcass of a whale, high and white like a monument. The silver noises that she heard came from the rib cage, where the sea breezes danced in between the bones. For many minutes, the lady stood and watched and listened to sounds that moved her to tears. She returned enthralled to the castle and immediately summoned her musicians who played every night at supper. Visit straight away the sands at Ross's Point, she told them, and listen to the sound of the wind blowing through the carcass of the whale. Then come back here and devise a means of making that music. And so the musicians mounted their horses, rode off to the beach, and dismounted by the carcass. They too found the sounds and chanting. And they spent hours there that day, scratching their heads, walking north and south and east and west of the white shape, trying to divine how the music was caused. What tensions, what structures, they thought, would be necessary to make something so lovely. Like scientists, somber and grave, they questioned and pondered and considered. On their return to the court, they began work immediately with the carpenter of Breffni O'Rourke. And some weeks later, they produced a very large, ponderous-looking wooden instrument with long, thin staves that reached from top to bottom across a frame that was curved like a whale's rib cage. They brought this contraption into the castle yard, and as good fortune would have it, the wind blew from the west that very day. And to their great delight, their instrument made sounds even more beautiful than the carcass of the whale. Next, they wheeled the instrument around to the front door of the castle and sent a message to the lady that her music was ready. She emerged at once, and she could hear the melodies as she approached. In fact, all the people of the castle turned out when they heard these heavenly notes. As they all stood and listened, some of the people felt that a great miracle had come to the home of Breffany O'Rourke. But there were two problems. First of all, this instrument was as big as a van, and as the lady pointed out, she could only listen to it outside. It was much too big to fit into the castle door. And Sligo, like the rest of Ireland, was not a place where one could listen to music out of doors all year round. The second point she made was that it was getting late in the day, and as the sun began to sink in the west, the wind dropped, and of course the music ceased. "Where's my music?" said the lady to her musicians. And they responded quite reasonably that the music only played when the wind blew. To which she responded, "Well, then how am I supposed to listen to it when I sit to dine?" The musicians looked at the carpenter, and the carpenter looked at the musicians. "Well, place it in a corner of the yard under an open window of the dining hall." This was the carpenter speaking, trying to solve two problems at once. "But the wind might not always blow in that corner of the yard, and even if it did, it would make the room much too cold to sit in." One of the musicians piped in and said, "Well, perhaps the carpenter could make a bellows, like that the blacksmith uses for blowing on the fire." "I don't want a blacksmith's bellows inside or outside the dining hall. Are you all dotes or something?" She was getting quite cross by now. Excuse me. Just then, a child wandered forward. He was a boy of about 9 years old, blonde-haired and inquisitive. He leaned in to get a closer look at the instrument, reached out to touch it, and drew his fingers along the tall wooden staves. But then he withdrew his hand with an expression of distaste on his face. "I'm surprised the wind would want to play this thing." Now, this boy, he was the son of the Lady Breffany's housekeeper, and he was renowned in that household for his cleverness and his powers of observation. The musicians knew him well because he often spent many hours listening to them and observing how they played. One of them had actually begun to teach him the tin whistle. "Well, what's wrong with it?" said the carpenter. It's too unfriendly. These wooden bones, they offer no welcome," said one of the musicians. "Well, what would you find more welcoming?" "Something easy, a supple thing, something that would bend to the fingers. Then you wouldn't need the wind, and any of us could learn to play it." "But how would that make music?" said the carpenter. "The music is not made here," said the boy, indicating the wooden slats. "The music is made here, where the vibrations echo from the blown bones." And he was indicating the broad frame of the instrument. "He's absolutely right," said the musicians. "And it could be a lot smaller, provided the box was deep enough to reverberate." And so they carried the instrument away and removed the wooden staves and replaced them with long strings of gut taken from the stomachs of cows and waxed with the grease of a goose. It took them only a few hours, and they brought it back again into the castle yard. That night, the Lady Breffany O'Rourke of Sligo sat to dine and listening to music that seemed even sweeter than the melody she had first heard in the skeleton of a whale. The next day, They made a much smaller version, and they were able to bring it inside the castle that very night. It was even sweeter than the first. And that is how the Irish invented the harp. And did you know that Ireland is the only nation on earth to have a musical instrument for its national symbol? Canada has the maple leaf. Scotland has the thistle. New Zealand has the silver fern. And England has the rose. Wales has the leek. The United States of America, the eagle. Ireland has the harp.